Today, much of our contributions will focus on the horrific cruelty to animals associated with the greyhound industry, but I think it would be remiss of us to not acknowledge how corrosive gambling is in and of itself to those who find themselves locked in its voice-like grip. My colleague Holly Kearns in her opening remarks requested that each deputy might declare if they have a conflict of interest in relation to the greyhound or the associated industries. So let me first begin by declaring somewhat of my own. Throughout my time in college and university, I spent several years working in bookmakers. Each day, initially you start off with just a job, but you can't help but see each weekend and evening how corrosive that very industry is to the lives and humanity of those people who find themselves in the midst of a grip. And it's all-encompassing, and gambling addiction afflicts people at every stage of their lives. And oftentimes it's silent, it works across demographics, it afflicts people be it in rural Ireland or in urban Ireland or wherever you feel. And we can't separate the cruelty of this particular sport from the impacts it has on people across Ireland. Across Ireland alone, this week, there are 29 dog meetings taking place. On average, there are about 10 races per card, although some have more. We can reasonably estimate that there will be well over 300 dog races happening through the course of this week in Ireland. That's not to take into consideration that in every bookie shop, you'll also see each dog race meeting from England, from Scotland, from Wales, from Australia, from anywhere else where they're happening. You'll see them put through onto the screens. Each little bell that rings there, you'll see the dog going off, but just before it happens, a person will come to the counter and they'll put €50, €20, €10, and inevitably you'll see that the problem and the problems associated with the industry being inflicted onto that person and at each individual there. Inevitably, somebody walks into the shop and they have a little bit of happiness in them, and over the course of hours, over the day, you'll see that eroded. And this industry is draining. It's draining to the person and it's draining to the economy of Ireland. Over the course of 2017, Irish people gambled €9.8 billion per head. That was about €379.51, and on a total loss of $1.3 billion, often coming out of household budgets. Those who disagree with us on this particular motion will say that the levies accrued from the industry themselves will point to the levies accrued from the industry themselves, but this is a moral issue. It's not simply how we fund the exchequer, it's absolutely a moral issue. But even to those that carry that argument, I'd say that since 2001 alone, the taxpayer has given $1.5 billion, over $1.5 billion to the greyhound industry. This is an industry that isn't sustainable. We're going to be told that this is a way of life for communities in rural Ireland, but I'll point to those 29 dog meetings that will take place this week. It's not just because of a pandemic. Through most of the time over the last couple of years, those dog meetings are absolutely empty. You don't find communities there socialising or bonding. You'll find the dog meetings relatively empty. The attendances, as Deputy Kearns has already pointed out, has fell significantly. What they are, though, is they're being funnelled into each and every bookie shop all over the country, and you'll see people there having their lives destroyed as a consequence of it. I do want to point out that many people in this chamber who may be in government now have previously pointed to the greyhound industry and described it as being abhorrent. It doesn't stop being any less abhorrent just because who sits at cabinet now or who they sit alongside. I think this is an industry that has long since passed its sell-by date. I think this is an industry that doesn't reflect who we are as a republic. It's corrosive not only to the animals who are suffering as a consequence of it, to the human beings who are finding themselves on the receiving end of the more negligible aspects in terms of the addictions that are associated with it. And let's be very clear, the people who benefit from this play off those addictions. And the dogs who are killed as a consequence of it are just par for the course. And the Social Democrats bring forward this motion today because we think it's long since time it's stopped. But all we ask for is that increase in funding to be stopped and reallocated to animal welfare. I think this is an issue that each of us can get behind. I think this is an issue that needs to pass. It's not an issue. It's an issue that reflects who we are as a republic. And I call on all deputies not to leave their principles at the door just because they've walked into the chamber alongside people who they're claiming they disagree with at times.